All right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar on supervision of peer workers. My name is Mary McCarty-Arias, and I will be your trainer for the next 2 hours. Thank you very much for coming. So just a couple of things to start off. Some of you have probably been on our courses pretty regularly, and you've heard the commercial, but let me just say that this course is given by, or I work for, the Northeast and Caribbean ATTC, the Addiction Technology and Transfer Center. And generally, we are located at the New York State Psychiatric Institute at Columbia Presbyterian or New York Presbyterian on 168th Street. But most of us have not been to that site probably since March. So I am doing this from home, and my colleagues, our IT person, Clyde, he's doing it from his home, and Tree Chapel may also be on, and we're all in different boroughs, all in different places, and we're glad to be here. I do think, somebody just said, are you all muted? Yes, you all are muted. Since this is WebEx, you will be muted, and I'll go over in probably the next 3 slides about the chat box and how to use it. And actually, as you are writing in, by the way, everybody can see what everybody's writing in, so welcome. So that's kind of the commercial. I will say that next week I'm doing a course, and I think that the official title is something like What Every Counselor Needs to Know About HIV and AIDS, and I'm updating it to make sure that people are getting the most recent information, and it may be helpful, and you will get 2 hours for your credentialing. Some of my colleagues who you know, Diana Padilla and Paul Warren, are also doing courses, and if you go to our calendar, you'll be able to see what we're offering. What we do, by the way, is that Tree Chapel, who is our person, who's in charge of getting out the certificates. Usually what she'll do is at the end of the month, she'll ask us what courses we're doing. So the courses for October are up, and then the courses for November are not up yet. So glad, I always like, it's funny because when I'm reading people saying hello to me, I want to go, hi, how are you doing? But sometimes I will not say hello to everybody, or else we'd be here for 2 hours with me saying hello to everybody. Anyway, glad, again, really glad that you are here. I think in November, by the way, there will be that new training package from the National Addiction Technology and Transfer Center, and it's on stimulants. And I was on the panel that helped work with it, but it'll be a lot of work on and a lot of training on cocaine and methamphetamine. So that's coming down the pike. So this course, by the way, is new, and it's part of the series I've been doing on working with peers. And I think a couple of weeks ago, some of you were in my course on professional boundaries. And then we did the course on relapse prevention for recovering counselors and peers. And this is something that people have asked me to do. So let's give it a shot. So you see this in all our courses, by the way, and we do have to read it, or you can read it yourself probably, but the development of these training materials was supported by a grant. There's the number. M. Chappell, Mike Chappell is my supervisor, and the grant was supported by the Center of Substance Abuse Treatment, Substance Abuse, and Mental Health Services Administration, also known as SAMHSA. And they want to be pretty clear on this, and actually any course you take from any of the ATTCs, by the way, and there are 10 others, so you can take their courses as well, especially their webinars, so you can get courses from the people in Seattle or New Mexico or across the country. So the contents are solely the responsibility of the Northeast Caribbean Addiction Technology Transfer Center and do not necessarily represent the official views of SAMHSA. So we also put this here is that in every course, and it's a value that we have. And what it speaks to is about that really language matters and words have power. And for many of you, by the way, who are either supervisors or for some of you who are peers, you've heard us talk a lot about people first language. And so we just want to put that out there that the ATTC network uses affirming language to promote the promises of recovery by advancing evidence-based and culturally informed practices. I will say that one of my colleagues at UCLA, Tom Freese, was saying how sometimes it's really always hard that sometimes we make mistakes and around giving out, saying people first. So I will do my best on that. And I always tell people when I went to grad school many years ago, one of the first things we learned the first week of school, and it was at a program in rehabilitation counseling for people with disabilities. And they said, by the way, start saying the person with the disability. So the person with substance use, the person with schizophrenia, the person with depression. And so one of the things I think that's helpful, and some of you have heard me proselytize this in person, is that when you start to talk like that, you also start to look at people as people and not just what the diagnosis is. So same picture I put up all the time. And some of you I know in person. If you're from other places of the country, I see somebody from Montana, welcome. But that's where I think I'm going on vacation next summer, God willing. And I have been working in the field. Most of my training, or actually most of my experience, has been in training because that's what I love to do. And I've done a lot of courses in substance use, mental health, and/or co-occurring disorders, HIV, and vocational rehabilitation. A couple of things to add, by the way, is before I went to grad school, I worked for the Peace Corps recruiting office, and that was when I was manager and supervisor of the office. So this actually redoing this course gave me the opportunity to reflect on what I did well and what I needed improvement on. Oh, for the person who says Montana is amazing, I am going to Glacier, have already been to Yellowstone. Anyway, I better not talk too much, but we could talk another time. But that is just really something about who I am. And also, I've been working on a technical assistance project with some agencies in New York City. I'm working with peers, and I've been working pretty closely with NADAP, and I did ask them this morning if I could mention them and give some examples of what we've been doing, especially around integrating peers into treatment. So that has been a real joy, and hope that we're actually kind of continuing it on Zoom, but looking forward to doing it in person at some time. Oh, let me say too, is that the source for this training, and for those of you who, by the way, are supervisors and or peers, SAMHSA actually has a technical assistance program, or they fund a technical assistance program, and this training was adapted from a course. It was developed by Bringing Recovery Supports to Scale, BRSS. And they had developed a lot of this course. I went in and changed some of the slides or changed some of the order of things and put in some different kinds of exercises. But they have a lot of information and things that you could want for peers. So you could see that at the bottom, and you can go to them as well. Let me just say, and going back to the chat, I cannot do anything about certificates for today. While I'm here, we'll make sure that you get the correct people to contact at the end of the training. So I got to actually focus on the training. All right, Clyde will take care of it. Tree will take care of it. So what are the goals? Goals for this course, and again, it's going to be pretty basic, is we'll start to really look at, it's kind of a beginning course for introducing a topic of supervision of peers, and also to increase the knowledge of supervisors in working with peers. Some of you may be supervisors who have had a lot of experience, and I'll probably ask you to write in things as we go along. Some of you may be new, but we'll be talking about some of the basics of supervision around working with peers. So what are the objectives? we'll look at the essential functions of a supervisor. So it's interesting because sometimes you think, oh, I already know a lot of this stuff, but in some cases it will be reviewing information that you already know, but we'll talk about it very specifically. We'll also look at some challenges for supervisors who are not peers. And I'm going to say that I've done a fair amount of training for peers, mainly through New York State, by the way, and New Jersey. And there's always some challenges that people are dealing with. And one of the big ones is that sometimes supervisors who are not peers are not as comfortable working with peers, but we'll talk about that. On the other hand, there's challenges for supervisors who are peers. So that, for example, let's say you were a peer and then you were given a promotion to be a supervisor, but you've never been a supervisor before. And now all the people who you were peers with and who are friends of yours, you are now supervising. We'll talk about that. So we'll look also at the functions of a supervisor, and we'll look at them from a couple of ways. We'll look at them from administrative, educative, and supportive. We'll look at ways also you can use strengths-based supervision, and we'll look at different kinds of supervision formats. And there's probably a variety of things. What has been offered up in the technical assistance program has been to look at individual supervision, group supervision, and co-supervision. And if you don't know what those are yet, you'll know that by the end of the day. And then also one of the last pieces I'll do is there is an assessment for you all to assess your supervisory knowledge and skills. Let me say that you do not have to share anything. I'm not going to have you fill out a form. I'm going to show you the form and tell you where you can get it. But also we'll start to review and you could start to assess yourselves. So what is supervision? Now, this is kind of a general description, so you can read from the bullets. It's a professional and a collaborative activity between a supervisor and a worker. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. The supervisor provides guidance and support, I hope. And another thing to look at is that, and this is another important piece, by the way, I started a couple of weeks ago doing the course on professional boundaries and ethics for peers, but this is for counselors in general, that the supervisor also promotes ethical delivery of services and support. So ethics is a big piece in our field, and I think that is really important to look at. So why is supervisor or why is supervision important? Basically, as you may know, it's important because it's an investment. It's an investment actually in the person. It's an investment in your agency. It benefits all employees. It benefits the people that you serve, and it benefits the agency. So good supervision is really a powerful tool. And I think that's important as well. So I am going to ask you a question. So here's, and actually anybody can answer this, but it kind of goes to supervisors, but why are we focusing on peers? Why focus on peers and supervision? So if you would write that in, by the way, the question is why focus on peers? So please write in. Why do we focus supervision on peers? Provide support. Thank you. Since we know what they're going through, to train them for positions within the agency. Thanks everybody so far. To give support, to give encouragement. They may have unique supervision needs. I think that's an important piece as well. Again, you'll see those chat going up pretty quickly. Your relationship with them can have an effect on how you supervise them, to guide them. It gives the peer someone to talk with. You check in with triggers and needs. They may need a different type of supervision, repetition on support and guidance. Somebody wrote, it shouldn't have to be difficult, but it seems like my supervisors who have supervised me in as a peer have a harder time. Yeah, I've heard that a lot. Somebody wrote, because they have lived experience and they need guidance to practice and also keep themselves well. And they may not have necessarily formalized education to ensure quality of service being provided. And yes, self-care. Self-care is gigantic, by the way. It's big for everybody, but for peers, it's really, really important. And to provide support and maintain boundaries to ensure their wellness and health and recovery process, to eliminate the gap between treatment and expectations of the peer and other non-peer workers. And that has been a challenge. So I really appreciate I appreciate everybody writing them in. A couple of things I think, and some of this we'll cover as we go along. There are some things where peers are not going to be unique to any kind of supervision you've already done. On the other hand, they may have unique needs, again, depending on the person, and probably everybody needs supervision. And so I think it's important to look at as well. And actually somebody wrote, clinical supervisors may feel the need to provide therapeutic support crossing boundaries in the supervisory relationship. Yes, that is a tricky one too, so that the boundaries for the supervisor are also really important. And as somebody also wrote, reviewing boundaries is a constant, and actually probably reviewing boundaries is something people need to do regularly, and also dealing with peers when they have a relapse has been very challenging. And unfortunately, I think with COVID, so many people have relapsed that many of people who've been peers have also relapsed, and again becomes challenging. And when people are working, it can also kind of put a double piece on it. All right, so let's go to the next slide. And here's what it says, and we'll actually look at, by the way, challenges to supervising peer workers for non-peers, and then we'll talk about that, and then we'll also look at some of the challenges for supervising peers for peers. So here's what we got. I've seen this a lot, by the way, and sometimes some of the supervisors don't have a lack of experience working with peers. And sometimes people are nervous or have some fears about that. Another big thing is the lack of knowledge about peer roles in practice, and also integrating peer workers and recovery values in a treatment setting. So we'll be talking about that. Sometimes the organizations are not clear, by the way, on what peers are supposed to be doing. So sometimes it's been a challenge for everyone. All right, let me see what people have written. I've seen peers have fewer expectations than their non-peer counterparts. The issue too is that not everyone wants to disclose as a peer. So peers deal with their own challenges, as do counselors, around self-disclosure. One of the big differences is that peers are often encouraged to share their own recovery when it's appropriate, where for some of you as counselors and supervisors, it is not. So a couple of things about this, and with what are recovery values? Person-centered, strength-based, and everyone has potential. I am going to ask a question on that on the next thing. So if, for example, you're a peer, or no, sorry, you are supervising peers, but you're a non-peer, what can you do? And this could be for everybody, because this could be generally, not you in particular, but what can people do when they are supervising peer workers and they are not peers, or maybe they don't know a lot about substance use? So I am going to ask you to write that in. Sorry, excuse me. So what can you do? Attend a training. I think that's a big one, and I think that is a really good thing. I think what I've seen is the more that people, I think, know about substance use, the more that it can kind of help them feel comfortable to attend the peer trainings, ask for help and understanding, work closely. Thanks. These are all great answers. Talk to them about it, ask questions. We can learn a lot from them. Listen and learn. Work side by side. Be open. Become educated. Ask questions. Be honest. Give more support and provide a lot of feedback. Be approachable. Be open to their experience. That's what they would like to achieve in their position and ask for feedback. These are all, I think, good things to start to do it. If, by the way, I don't read what you wrote, I apologize. There's a lot of things coming in and I kind of have to pick up on whatever I can see and try not to repeat what people have already said. As somebody wrote, you can ask the peer about their personal experiences and what things would they look to for a peer supervisor for them to be successful. So I guess what I think is that really there are a lot of things that people can do. I think just to acknowledge that, by the way, that some things will be unique and some things will not be. All right, let's try another one. So here's what sometimes happens. Yeah, remain teachable. That is, I hope, I'll speak from the I, that I do that as long as I live. But so here's what sometimes happens is that sometimes there's challenges to supervising peer workers for peer supervisors. And this has happened maybe to some of you. Even, for example, you are a really good counselor and then you get promoted. Somebody who's a really good peer gets promoted, but they don't necessarily have the skills to be a supervisor. And so here's a couple of things that we can kind of look at. So may lack training and experience with supervision. Depending too, by the way, on one's work background, is you may have had good supervisors, you may have had bad supervisors, but for a lot of people, it's not just something that you don't have to learn. Another big thing is the lack of the knowledge among staff about peer roles and practice. And a repetition, by the way, is organizations may not be aligned with recovery values, practices, and culture. And peer-run organizations may not have a culture of accountability. When I took that from the training and I thought, oh, that does sound pretty judgmental. But I'm going to say it depends. There's a lot of organizations that don't have a culture of accountability. But these days, there has to be accountability for us to provide really good services and also to get funded. So it speaks to, again, of that sometimes there are challenges if you are a peer. I remember when I was promoted, again, this was way back, of going from a peer to a supervisor. The big challenge was that all the peers were my friends and they were the people I ate lunch with all the time. And then all of a sudden I had to start thinking about boundaries. And I'm going to say the organization that I was with wasn't really big on boundaries. And it was really kind of a struggle to figure out how can you be friendly with somebody and then you have to give them feedback on their work. So it really becomes, I think, a challenge. So, I'm going to ask you to write in again. So if you are a peer who has become a supervisor, what can you do? You're a peer and you become a supervisor. What can you do? If anybody would like to write in, please. If there's anybody out there who was a peer, yeah, ask for guidance from my supervisor. Absolutely. Listen. Take trainings. Yep. I'm big on that one. Yeah, to learn about boundaries and training, education, training again. Establish your new role with friends and ask them what they think that role means now. Yeah, and it takes a lot of work to do that and a lot of skill. You could speak to your own supervisor for feedback, look for the positive, communicate expectations and boundaries. Yeah, be honest. If you don't know, you don't know. And I think many of you know this, for example, it's like with Counseling 101, one of the main things is being genuine. And when you don't know, you don't know. But to be able to admit that is a strength. And to start to understand the distinction between your two roles as a peer and as a supervisor. So I think there's a lot to do. The reason I think they kind of put it out in the training, by the way, is to acknowledge, I guess, two things. That if you are a supervisor without any peer experience, it might be challenging. And if you're a peer who becomes a supervisor but has never had supervisory experience, it's also a challenge. But it's interesting because a lot of what people wrote in was very similar. So it's really about training, it's about asking for help, it's about getting supervision and learning, being open, as people said, and I think that's important. All right, so what are the benefits of supervision? So there'll be two slides, and let's look at what we have here. And again, if this it seems almost like stuff that you know, but I think it's important to look at it. If you've never had supervision or you've had a job where you're not getting supervision very regularly, you don't get a lot of these. So here's what you get. It provides an opportunity to reflect on practice. And I think this one, by the way, is priceless. So I know, for example, I'm working with some peers, is that many times, and some of you can write this in as you go along for those of your peers, but sometimes you're in situations where you're out working on the street or you're going into people's homes and you may be dealing with your own quote stuff. And so the opportunity really to reflect on that, on what you did and what you didn't do, what you could do better, I think is really helpful. So it gives people, and actually everybody can profit from that. Yeah, somebody just wrote in evaluating personal and professional goals with timeframes. Yeah, it's kind of like we set out plans for our clients or patients, and we could do the same thing. It really is good. There used to be a book out a long time ago. It's called Management by Objective, and what it was that as a supervisor, you would work with people and say, what would you like to accomplish? And one of the reasons I liked it was because the person who I was supervising really figured out what they wanted to learn. And they also, in a sense, bought into it because they had developed a plan and we also had different timeframes and we also had ways to do it. And it was easy actually when I had to do performance evaluations, it was easy in a sense because people had already written what they wanted to do. And then you could kind of look at, here's what you did, here's where you need some improvement opportunities, which is my fancy term for when I'm working from a strengths model, I look at improvement opportunities. So I think it's something to look at. So it provides an opportunity to reflect. It delivers better outcomes, and that's for everybody, by the way. We all these days need better outcomes, whether it's for clients, whether it's for us, whether for it's our agency. It'll help enhance problem-solving skills. And some of you know, for example, when you've had a really good supervisor who helps you reflect on what you did, it gives you the opportunity to look at what would I do next? What could I have done better? And it really improves clarity and objectivity in decision making. So that is like one slide on some of the benefits. On the next slide, it really continues that. And it empowers, motivates, and increases worker satisfaction. Why do you want that to happen? Because you want people to be happy. When people are happy at their jobs, they do a better job. I know as a voc rehab counselor, we used to say that you spend some of your best waking hours at the job. And if you don't like your job, it really kind of permeates into other parts of your life. Yeah, let me read what somebody just wrote. Every profession within an organization has different boundaries of practice. Good supervisors understand these differences and reduce organizational disputes while increasing worker satisfaction and customer service. And that's really win-win. So it's when we help people, when we empower them, when we motivate them, that can be really helpful. Obviously, supervision can be used as a tool to achieve the agency's mission. And these days, again, as I've said, probably a few times so far, that is also important. It improves performance and helps to manage resources and increases morale and improves retention. One of the things I have seen, and this is actually nationally in terms of peers, is that sometimes retention has been really difficult. And I know, for example, again, from a vocational rehabilitation counselor point of view, it's one thing to get a job, it's another thing to keep a job. And sometimes people have struggles with that. I remember working with a woman who, I'll tell you if this story is, you can tell me if this story is appropriate or not, but she had been a sex worker, and she was really good at getting jobs. And I used to say to her, she could get a job even if with somebody, even if she didn't know what she was doing, or if she didn't know how to do the job. So for example, she could go for a job to be an IT specialist. She didn't know about IT. She got the job. So I used to say to her name was Candy, Candy, what's your secret? Why do you get, you go for the job interviews and you always get every job that you apply for? And what she told me was that she had learned early on from her other job, really, how to read people. She knew exactly what they wanted, and she always got the job. The problem she dealt with was later on at keeping the job. Sometimes what would happen for her is, I think her supervisors became like her father, and all her issues with her family issues came out, and she usually quit the jobs. So I know that's like an old story, but it just reminded me of kind of from a strengths model, but what do we do with retention? I know that I got my friends at NADAP who are on the call, I believe, or on the webinar, and they actually do a lot of courses on job retention. So I think that's important as well. One thing before I go on to another slide is I wanted to talk briefly about something that I've done in my technical assistance program. And I've done it with NADAP. And what we decided to do was, and I have a variety of agencies. So by the way, I asked them if I can use either their names and the agencies. And one was Project ACE in Brooklyn. Another one was SUCAP in Manhattan. And another one was their community, I forget what CES stands for, but it was their employment services. And what we did was the supervisor and the peer and I, we worked together and we came up with, it was really only like 6 slides. And my job was to talk briefly about what peers were, and what they've been doing throughout the country, and also to look at maybe the difference between a peer and a counselor, and a peer and a sponsor. And then we really turned it over to the peer. So I'm not going to mention the peers' names. Some of them have gone on to other positions, but what they did was they had a slide and they would talk about, this is what I can do for you. And it was just one way, and all staff attended. So at Project ACE, everybody came at one session. And with SUCAP, which is at the welfare office on 16th Street, or was, even though some of you are working at home, what we did was we did 2 sessions because the counselors really couldn't all be released for one session. And so it was just something that we did to integrate. and help integrate the peer into the the agency. So I hope that makes sense as I'm talking about it, but it was just something that came up and I wanted to really go through that as well. So there's different kinds of functions of a supervisor. And again, this comes from the technical assistance program I was telling you about, but there's different in terms of administrative supervision, educative supervision, and supportive supportive supervision. This initially, I think the source for this, by the way, was from a book called Supervision in Social Work by Kukushkin. And so what we'll do is we'll look at what are the differences. Actually, as somebody wrote in, as a supervisor, we sometimes need to help peers translate valuable life skills into valuable professional skills. Absolutely, because when you think about, again, from a strengths model, what a peer brings into your agency, there's a lot of ways you can help in that. And again, I think as the person wrote, you also want to kind of translate that into which of those skills that you had, say, on the street are now helpful for work, and how can we work with you on that one? All right, so administrative. Now, so when you do administrative supervision, here's a couple of things that you do. And I'll probably ask you to add things that that you all do as well as supervisors. So you work with people around the quality of work. You work with people around their workload. You look at things like getting paid and dealing with human resources and figuring out when holidays are or what vacation time you get and all of those administrative things. You also work with people around time management. That has been, I've seen this in the field for actually everybody, that time management also becomes sometimes a challenge. But I'm kind of making a face as I'm saying that, by the way, because what I think happens too is that sometimes as peers and counselors, that your workload becomes so large that it's really not a situation of time management, although it can be. It's really like having two big caseloads. But I think it's important to really look and help people with that. A big issue, by the way, we used to find when this is again go back to a strengths model, is sometimes when I was doing sessions with people and they came on time, I would say, this is great, coming from a strengths model, you are really working with people on, you're showing up for work on time. The challenge, by the way, is, as some of you supervisors know, when you're dealing a lot with lateness, is that it's a strength, but also it's a requirement of the job. So many people are struggling with, what goes on in terms of showing up for work on time. So those are sometimes the issues that I think I've seen or heard people working with. And record keeping, again, how to put down on paper or on the computer what's been going on. Are there things people would add, by the way, as far as administrative? Right, I'm going to go on to the next one, which is educative. So I already mentioned again, and I think this is really priceless, is the time to reflect on pure practice. And what I've seen, and this is when I was working with an AmeriCorps program out of Phoenix House, and all of the counselors, or all of the AmeriCorps people, were people in early recovery studying to be counselors. And when we could just sit and talk with people about what was going on, because sometimes, they would be working with people and they were people that they knew from the street, and it became a boundary issue, became very gigantic, and also was really scary for some people. Let's see. Supervisors, I'm going back to the chat. Supervisors also need to acknowledge when time management is an organizational issue and not an issue of pure mismanagement of their time. I agree with you big time on that. And I remember when I was working at Gracie Square Hospital, our division had a trainer come in and do time management because I think some people weren't getting they weren't recording on time. And the trainer came in and said, after talking to everybody on our staff, this is not an issue of time management. This is an issue of too much work for too many people, and there's not a lot of things that you can do. So I know that might not be helpful, but I think sometimes to acknowledge that it's not you, it's the amount of work that you have. But that's where I think kind of going back, yeah, having a mentor sounds good. Absolutely. So time to reflect, and actually I'll talk about that actually next with supportive. Uh, Also, many of you do this and you know that you focused on knowledge, skills, and attitudes. And that, by the way, you can get access to, if you've read, remember when we used to get tips, the treatment improvement protocol series, which I think are still available, although people download them a lot now, but they always had knowledge, skills, and attitudes for counselors. But that same organization where I got this information has knowledge, skills, and attitudes for peers. And I think that's important as well. So sometimes you're helping people on what they need to know, what are some of the skills, and also attitudes. And that's gigantic, by the way, all three of those together. You provide individualized training and support, and really it's a venue for supporting the peer workers' professional development. So actually, I will throw out a question. Here's a question. How do you provide educative supervision? I never use the word educative, by the way, but how do you educate people in supervision? So for those of you who are supervisors, please write in, what do you do to educate your peer? What do you do to educate your peer, the person you're supervising, that would reflect the practice or knowledge, skills, and attitudes? It's like counseling 101. When you ask a question, you should keep your mouth shut and wait. The challenge with doing it online is that I ask the question, you have to think, and then you have to type it in. So sometimes there's a gap between that. So if you don't hear me, it means I'm waiting for people to respond. What do you do in terms of providing educative supervision to your people? Thank you for writing in. Modeling, and that's excellent. Offering training opportunities. Again, more education opportunities during work hours. Having peers create an education plan with goals. Excellent. Discuss their performance and identify areas of strengths as well as improvement. Then identify needs to assist in improving. Thank you. Shadowing, that is also priceless. Provide time in their work schedules to attend meetings. Yeah, modeling again works really well. Coactive coaching. Thank you. These are all really good things. Acclimate the peer to the culture and practices of the program. Arrange for them to observe various role models carrying out their responsibilities. Excellent. Use appropriate training materials. Find appropriate training. Yeah, and again, everybody's saying a lot of the same things, and I think it's really good because modeling is priceless. To be able to shadow other people, I think, is also very helpful. And in some cases, to do role playing. The key is to figure out, what you do and what works best for your peer. I was thinking too is that one of the things about work I think that's interesting is that there's formal rules and informal rules. And you know how sometimes, like where I work, by the way, we have lots of formal rules about what you can do and what you can't do. And they're very strict, by the way. I'm not sure what the informal rules are, but I've worked at places where, if you finished your work, you could leave early and it was okay. Or, if you had been training, but it varies according to the place. The challenge sometimes with the informal rules is that they're not on paper, and it's, how do you figure out which are the ones that will be helpful and which are the ones that will get you in trouble? Yeah, that's another good one. Have the peers share case studies to increase knowledge and gain a broader insight into helping clients. And yeah, those came in privately, by the way. Thank you. Because again, I think the key, by the way, is that it happens, and it kind of goes back to reflecting on the practice. I think those are lots of things you can do. Now, another part is supportive. And some of you have mentioned this, by the way, giving feedback on your work. And I think we'll probably put it in another slide, by the way, is just because we look at things from a strengths model doesn't mean you don't have to give people feedback on how to improve what they're doing, but to get feedback is also priceless. To discuss their personal reactions to the work. And you can see that sometimes they might overlap, but this is important as well because sometimes people are struggling with what they see and what they're feeling. Validating and providing encouragement, promoting self-care practices, and advocating for peer support roles. So I think this is also really important, and that one of the things about support and supportive counseling or supportive supervision, it's different than getting a support from a friend. So it's also, by the way, good to have friends who can give you support, but getting support from a supervisor is a little bit different, or a little bit different. It is different, and I think it's important to look at. So I think with supervisors, understanding the variety of roles and learning more about some of the core competencies. But I think these are all good things, and I appreciate, again, people writing them in. So there's 3 different parts of supervision. All right. Another thing that's important for supervisors to know is the recognition of trauma, health disparities, and social inequity. And, this is what I think I've seen kind of nationally, is that sometimes there's a gap between, let's say, in formal education between the supervisor and the peer. But I think, and this is for everybody, for us to look at, is really to have a holistic view of the peer, but also to realize again that, first of all, a person's recovery is really important, and that we need to, and you've seen this, by the way, in terms of, I know New York State puts this out about the importance of, for those of you who are peers, about maintaining your recovery. So it's like recovery first, recovery kind of by any means necessary, but for the supervisor to also recognize that, and it's just not about abstinence, but it's about kind of the whole biopsychosocial, spiritual improvements. You want to look again at the recognition of the interconnected nature of race, class, and gender as they apply to discrimination. There's that term called intersectionality. And again, the ability to support workers to address issues of poverty, trauma, and discrimination. So for example, sometimes what might happen, I've seen this unfortunately, where the peer just left treatment as in a new housing situation, and they're dealing with some of the issues around getting good housing, and or, as we know too, is the issues of trauma come up for people in recovery, and especially in early recovery. So just recognizing that we're looking at the peer from a holistic point of view. So you want to have, again, coming from a strength model, but also not ignoring some of the problems. So I know we went over this a couple of weeks ago on the webinar that had to do with boundaries and ethics, but this is something you could do regularly with people. And I also think that reviewing boundaries actually and reviewing ethics regularly is not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing to do so that you can, as a supervisor, to review the peer workers code of ethics. So what is it? In some states, by the way, like in Europe, for example, it is different than the code of ethics for counselors, and it may differ again according to the state that you're in. You also want to be really specific on what's the agency code of conduct and what you can do and what you can't do. And I think another big one is support in the nuance of boundary issues. So some boundary issues are black and white, some are grayer. So remember, we were talking a couple of weeks ago. I think one of the challenges and this actually happens for counselors and for peers, is that people get involved sexually with their clients. And it unfortunately happens too frequently. Now, that's not a gray area. That's definitely a black and white area, meaning you're not supposed to do it and you can get into a lot of trouble. And there's a lot of danger, by the way, in doing it for everybody. Some support, though, is going to be, some boundaries are going to be a little bit more nuanced. And I think that's important. The key, by the way, is really of you advocating for your peers, advocating for your peers. So here's something on recovery-oriented values. So you've seen this before, maybe in some other courses, and I think it's really important for us to think about, and this, gosh, in these days of COVID and what we're going through, I think hope is really important, so that your job, or actually as supervisors, you can inspire growth for people by providing hope. And it's not false hope or fake hope, but actually giving people hope that they can be successful at the jobs that they're doing, I think is really important. We obviously want it to be the value of person-centered. So it's really what is the individual? What are their aspirations? How are you helping them with that? And strength-based, focusing on the unique gifts of each worker, and also interdependence. So what's the balance between teamwork, autonomy, and mutual support? So those are some of the recovery-oriented values. So there's different kinds of supervision formats, and one is individual, another is group, another is co-supervision. I don't have, let's see, I don't have slides on each of them, but I can tell you what they are and what the advantages are. So if you provide supervision for somebody individually, you know that there's definitely some advantages. One is that, you know, it's exclusive, and for some people, by the way, it may feel safer, and it can also kind of encourage confidentiality. So individual supervision with people is very positive. What the training that was developed was saying that here's what you have to look out for. What would be some of the disadvantages? One, a dependency can develop. Two, you're only getting one perspective. And sometimes there's a lost opportunity of learning from each other. So individual actually, I think, is a good way to start. And you can figure out for yourselves what works best. Group supervision, where you're working with peers together, and often it's more efficient, obviously, because it's a group. People can learn from each other. It reduces isolation. On the other hand, it may feel unsafe for people, and it may miss some individual opportunities. It reminded me of when I first started at a job. We had individual supervision, but we also had group supervision, and it was led by a person who wasn't our supervisor. And one of the advantages was we had a safe place to really talk about some of the issues we were dealing with our patients, and was really very helpful. And then at some point, the individual supervision stopped, but the group supervision continued. And then co-supervision can mean a couple of things. One, it can be also that another person who's not the supervisor, similar to what I just said, is providing supervision. And I think that can be helpful as well. So those are just some of the supervision formats. Actually, if people want to write in, oh, thank you. People have already started to doing that. Individual supervision provides peer safe space to speak without feeling judged. And that's, again, very, I think, gigantic, is that when people do have the opportunity to discuss what's going on with them and there is privacy, that can be really helpful. So which of the supervision formats are people doing? Are you doing individual or are you doing group? Individual and group, excellent. Individual, great. As you know, the good thing is that it's happening. What's been happening is that sometimes when agencies are losing people who are supervisors and they don't get replaced, the supervision goes down, or doesn't happen. Whenever when I was doing in-person trainings and I'd ask people who gets supervision, I'm going to say that 50% of the people in the group did not. Good. So people have you have a backup as well. I think the key is that it happens. Oh yes, the combination of both is valuable, although group is more challenging to make that happen. Since Laura, I asked you if I could share about this, I could tell you something that hasn't kind of worked. What we've wanted to do with NADAP was they had a variety of agencies, and we thought, wouldn't it be a great idea to get people together to do group supervision? And what seemed to happen is that sometimes in some cases, people were leaving the group, and we never got around to it yet, I think because of COVID. What I still think it's a really good idea. My idea was that we would start the group supervision, but that I would start on the first day and then let go and let the peers have their own supervision, have peer supervision. So that's something we're thinking about. And will it happen? I'm not sure, but I think it's something that I think can be really useful. At the time, the people who were the peers were very happy about the idea of that, and unfortunately, some of them are not there anymore. Yeah, no, it's good. Actually, I know people are doing virtual group supervision for 2 hours once a month, first Wednesday. Actually, that's excellent. And that actually these days, since we are doing almost everything virtually, I think the key, by the way, is that if people know it's once a month, and that's what we were going to do also on our group for 2 hours, and they know it's the first Wednesday, that gives people a lot of, I think, hope and structure. So I think that is a really good idea to do it. Yeah, and as somebody wrote it, group supervision encourages peers to feel more confident in their voice and abilities and to share their experiences. And I think, again, that is, I keep using the word priceless, but I think that supervision is priceless for people. And actually having a variety of ways to get supervision is really helpful to developing people and to making sure everything is going the way it's supposed to be going. So I think that is helpful as well. So slide on, strength-based supervision. You know, we talk about this a lot, and I know some of you are really good at this, by the way. And what we want to do is to discover and amplify, I like that word, the worker's strengths and competencies. Absolutely. Identify and amplify their success, to encourage learning and shared responsibility. But it doesn't mean ignoring the problems, by the way, because you want to give feedback and self-assessment tools as well. I'm going to read, you can't see this, by the way, but from that SAMHSA training, they gave examples of strength-based affirmations. So It's okay, I will read a couple of them. All right, first one. And this is the supervisor saying, you showed a lot of courage when you reminded the team that Nathan has a right to make an informed choice about which recovery home he wants to go to. I'll repeat. You showed a lot of courage when you reminded the team that Nathan has a right to make an informed choice about which recovery home he wants to go to. Strength-based. Another supervisor said to her person, I like the way you welcome people and help them feel comfortable here. I like the way you welcome people and help them feel comfortable here. Another one, the recovery plan you developed with Ian showed that you really understand how to do person-centered planning. The recovery plan you developed with Ian showed that you really understand how to do person-centered planning. And then the last one I have on my paper, I want to let the team know that Stephen organized this in-service training. He's a master at creating a training and lining up speakers. And I think, again, strengths model is, and those are examples of not just telling the person what they're doing well, but amplifying so everybody knows what the worker is doing really well. And it's interesting because I think strength-based affirmations, as some of you know, they really work. My first job out of college was teaching 7th grade, and I remember the teacher said to me, find somebody doing something right. And I had a lot of students who were in special ed. And we used to try to work really closely on helping them figure out what they were strong on. And that was like millions of years ago. But you'll read some books actually on supervision that they'll use that term, find somebody doing something well. And I will tell, this is a personal story, when my late husband was a really good cook, and I used to use it on him too. I don't know if you knew this, but if he cooked something when I came home from work and it was good, guess what I did? I said, honey, those rice and beans, those were so delicious. All that fish, it was really so good. Now, why did I do that? Why? Because I wanted him to cook again. If I hadn't done it, or if I had said, oh man, you really messed up the stove, now I have to clean it, guess what? He never would have cooked again. So I say that in honor of my late husband. So the key, by the way, is find people's strengths and let them know. Right? So for the remainder of this, by the way, is that this was that self-assessment I was telling you about. And what it'll be is it'll be on the next 2 slides after this one. What I'll ask, by the way, is if you are a supervisor, and you don't have to say anything on this one, but you want to rate yourself, and there will be 11 different questions. The ratings are, number 1, professional learning need. That's a fancy term for it. You need to learn more. 2, personal learning need. 3, sporadically competent. 4, consistently competent. And 5, mastery. So you can see from 1 to 5, that 5 goes up to mastery. 1, lots of learning needed. So everybody ready? I'm going to go to the next slide. So here's what you can answer for yourselves. I understand and can clarify organizational systems, structures, and processes. Would you give yourself a 5 for mastery, or 1 for professional need, 2 personal need, 3 sporadically competent, 4 consistently competent? I don't know why I find the term sporadically competent seems kind of funny for me. But yeah, I see, okay, lots of people are giving yourselves 5s for those of you who are writing in. And nobody has to write in. Okay, somebody gave themselves a 4. All right, seems like everybody's got a 5. All right, let's try the second one. I understand the values and practice of peer support. I understand the values and practice of peer support. How would you rate yourselves? 1, needing professional learning need. 2, personal. 3, sporadic. 4, consistent. 5, mastery. I understand the values and practice of peer support. And thank you for the person who was honest enough to write 1. We've got, okay, this one, we've got a 4, a 5, a 3. That's actually, it's good to hear, by the way, in a sense, and I appreciate people's honesty, because it may be that as supervisors, you'll need to go to more trainings or talk to people around the values and practices of peer support. All right, we've got lots of 4s. Thank you. So if there's room for improvement, thanks to the person who wrote in 2. All right, let's do number 3. I understand the roles and responsibilities of peer support workers. Number 3, I understand the roles and responsibilities of peer support workers. Are you a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? 5 means you've mastered it. 1 means you really need to learn it. 3, you're sporadically competent. All right, I see lots of 3s, I see 4s. So sporadically competent, consistently competent, cool. And again, no judgment from me, by the way, on what you get. I think the key, by the way, is that sometimes, and I think this is why sometimes it could be a self-assessment, is that you can really kind of look at, what am I good at as supervisors? What am I good at? What do I need to work on? Number 4, I can maintain a balance between the administrative, educational, and support functions of supervision. Number 4, I can maintain a balance between the administrative, educational, and support functions of supervisors. 1 would mean that it's a professional learning need, 5 mastery, 2, 3, 4 in between. All right, I see lots of 4s, 3s. I think, and this is my own opinion, is that sometimes I think maintaining balance these days can be challenging because some of your work situations are very challenging and kind of you're dealing with a lot of stress. Well, I think everybody's dealing with a fair amount of stress these days, but some of you I know are dealing with more than others. And actually, as supervisors, you kind of, in a sense, the challenge with that is it's your job to kind of maintain the balance. All right, number 5, I can establish a relationship characterized by trust and mutuality. I can establish a relationship characterized by trust and mutuality. 1 is professional learning need, 2, personal learning need, 3, sporadically competent, 4, consistently competent, 5, mastery. Good, I see lots of 4s, 5s, 4s. All right, I'm going to go on to the second page. And again, thanks for people writing in. All right, I see 3s and 4s. So the key, again, by the way, is to know, it's like anything, knowing your strengths, knowing where you want to make improvements, I think can be really helpful as well. It's funny, if we had maybe your peers filling this out for yourself, how would they rate you? So you could think about that as well. Or if you're working when you're in individual supervision, you could find out from your peers, from the peers you're supervising, what you're doing well, and also what might be something to improve on. All right, the second slide, number 6, I can provide an environment that promotes reflection on peer support practice and ethics. I can provide an environment that promotes reflection on peer support practices and ethics. Do you think you are a 5? You've mastered it. 4, consistently competent. 3, sporadically competent. 2, personal learning need. 1, definitely a professional learning need. So I see lots of 3s and 4s. Reese, again, I appreciate people's honesty. I think what's interesting too is, and I found this actually when I was working, is that sometimes if we didn't trust the supervisor, we didn't want to share anything personal because we felt like it would be thrown back in our faces at a later date. So I throw that out there as that not everybody always feels safe with their supervisors, and that's something that you can kind of look on. But if you can really provide an environment that really, and it's, remember, it's like trauma-informed care. It's like, how do you create safety? How do you not re-traumatize people? And you can apply that to your supervision with your peers. Thank you for somebody writing it exactly. 7, I can help a person set and plan for the achievement of professional goals. I can help a person set and plan for the achievement of professional goals. How would you rate yourselves? 1, lowish. 2, need. 3, sporadic. 4, consistent. 5, mastery. Okay, lots of 4s and 5s, 3s. See, that's a, it's a good one too, by the way. I will say that what I've learned a lot from peers is that I used to think as a vocational rehabilitation counselor that that all peers would want to be counselors when they had the chance. And guess what? Most people said they did not want to be counselors, but they were very happy to be peers, and that's what they wanted to do. I met some people throughout New York State who were counselors and then changed their jobs to peers and are happy. So just because, and I think it's really individual, what's working for people. Yeah, and actually, yeah, right. Somebody wrote in, it's your job as a peer mentor, is that you're helping people do that. So it's good if somebody can do it for you, and also you could do it for yourself, but it's helpful to have a person who can validate and give you some support. All right, number 8, I can teach and model skills needed for effective peer practice. Number 8, I can teach and model skills needed for effective peer practice. 5, you got the mastery. I'm going backwards. 4, consistently competent. 3, sporadically competent. 2, personal learning need. 1, professional learning need. All right, see, so this is a mixture, by the way, of 4s, 3s, 4s. It is kind of interesting too, because as you know, even like, for example, with ethics, if you as supervisors are modeling good ethical behavior, that's how you're also teaching ethics. And people learn by what they see, not by what you tell them to do. I think that works with kids too. So it's like, do as I say, not as I do, but modeling would be do as I do and work with people around that. All right, number 9. I can deliver strength-based supervision and can use affirmations. I can deliver strength-based supervision and can use affirmations. How would you rate yourselves, by the way? 5, you got the mastery. 4, consistent. 3, sporadic. 2, personal learning need. 1, professional learning need. So strength-based supervision. Right, so some people are kind of mastery at it. Some people with 3 need sporadic, but actually from a strengths model, again, it's where are you starting, and there's always room for improvement. It's almost sometimes like a habit, by the way, is as you start to look at things from a strength-based piece, it's a habit that you can do. All right, let me do number 10. I can give feedback that assists the person in recognizing a professional development need. I can give feedback that assists the person in recognizing a professional development need. So, giving feedback, which is sometimes very difficult. Where are you on that one? 5, mastery; 4, consistently competent; 3, sporadic; 2, personal learning need; 1, professional learning need. So there's a variety of things. I will, when I was a supervisor many years ago, I was young and I didn't like probably giving people quote bad things or things that they would have to do. So whenever I was doing performance evaluations, and I did this before I learned all this stuff from training, I would say, what do you think are your strengths? What have you done? What are your accomplishments? And would always start with that. And then I would say to the person, what do you think you could improve on? And fortunately, they almost always said what I would have had to tell them. So that's my wimpy way of saying that's what I did a long time ago. But sometimes would I still do that? I think it's really important to give people feedback, and you can give people feedback in a kind of a calm and loving way, and also being very specific to what the behavior was. So I see feedback 4s and 5s. And then the last one is I can advocate for recovery-oriented services within the agency. I can advocate for recovery-oriented services within the agency. 5, mastery; 4, consistently competent; 3, sporadically competent; 2, personal learning need; 1, professional learning need. So I see 4s and 5s. That's pretty great, pretty cool. And if you didn't answer, that's okay too. So the key, by the way, is I think it's always important to kind of look at what, where you are. We always expect other people to do that. And for us to do that ourselves, I think can be very, very useful. It might be a little ahead of time, but let me just say, and I will be opening up to questions, and I also did have a role play that I was going to do, but I was going to try to get my niece down the hall and her husband to act out the parts, but she's pregnant and doesn't want to come into my apartment because of the potential of COVID. So I've got it here, but I couldn't get any actors or actresses from my building. But anyway, just to kind of start to summarize, and I think this is a really good thing is peer workers fill new and unique roles. And for those of you who are peers, by the way, I salute you, because I think one of the things that I've seen is that when people meet you and you work with them, there is that certain like, people feel comfortable with you right away. And I think that is so important, and you can develop really good relationships with people. The second bullet is the supervision of peer workers. It's not dramatically different from supervising other roles, but there are specific competencies. So some of the basics of peer supervision would be what you would learn in a course on supervising other people. So some of them are not dramatically different, but there are, again, some of those nuances. And really what we need to do as supervisors is to develop your knowledge of peer roles, embrace a recovery orientation, and advocate. And I think that is really important. Again, as I've seen in some agencies, this is not NADAP, by the way, it's other agencies that I've seen where the people hire peers and they don't know what to do with them. And while they're trying to figure it out, the peer is trying to figure out where to go, what to do, and not getting a lot of help. But when you advocate for people, and then again, to use that NADAP example, when we really talk to people about this is what the peer can do, and this is how the peer can help you, people really bought into it. And I think sometimes people think that the peer is going to take the counselor's job, and we know that that's not true. But sometimes just to put it out there, I think can be really helpful. So, are there any questions? What questions do you have? So I know this was just a beginning piece really on, what is supervision. You can also let me know, by the way, if there's more courses that you would like on supervision or more topic areas. What you can do, by the way, is if you Google peer recovery, there's really tons of things. I tend to use things from SAMHSA, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. I also use things from OASIS, which is the State Division of Substance Use in New York. But I know actually in Connecticut, there's a lot of places. Actually, nationally, there's many places. And they talk about, again, there's a lot of booklets on that. So somebody said, you'd like more examples of the conversations that I've had? Is that with peers or with people in general? I'll hold on to that one. Will the slides be made available? Yes, you'll get copies of the slides. So for the person who asked more examples of the conversations that you've had, what do you mean by that? Or I'll start to tell you, I mean, some of the things I was in, this was maybe 2 years ago, I was in Buffalo, New York, and I was doing training, 2 days of training for peers. And that's where I started to really listen to what the peers wanted. And I think we were starting talking about actually ethics and boundaries. And one of the challenges I think that many of the peers had there was that they had to do home visits. And so, for example, if somebody overdosed, uh, the police would go in, but the peer would go in with the police. Now, that sounds like a good thing. The challenge, though, for the peer is that they were having to go into a place where somebody had just overdosed. There might have been a lot of drugs present, or seeing somebody overdose could have been a trigger. But I think the idea was really good. But they had to figure out ways that you could do that kind of, I'm going to say it in a healthy way, or how that impacts on your recovery. Oh, the person just like the ones you said, and like the way you made the people feel comfortable. I'm not sure I understand it, but I think what's really important is, you look at Counseling 101, or you look at how do we treat people, and if you treat people, remember the core qualities is things like respect. So as a supervisor, if you show respect for your peer, actually, or for anybody, people pick up on that, and that's when you start to really be able to engage people. And some people I think are really good at making people feel comfortable. What I was saying is that sometimes when a peer is talking to, let's say, somebody in the waiting room at a hospital, they sometimes don't even have to say they're in recovery, but people kind of get the sense like, this person understands me, even if in reality they don't. So I think that's really the strength that peers bring. And peers also are actually encouraged or allowed to share personal information that many of you cannot, and that can be helpful. And again, sometimes just, how people always say, with counselors, they always say, are you in recovery or not? And why did people ask that? One, they wanted to know, I mean, for personal reasons, but they were also trying to ask, what am I doing? Like, how can I trust you? Can I trust you? And that's why sometimes people will ask some of those questions. All right, I see a question. How do you break through to the counselors that they are to complement their role in their peers' life when they are not completely clear on our role of peer supporter? What I think is that you might want to have a meeting with the counselors, maybe, and the peers, and yourself, and you could actually email me about this, and I can talk it through with you at some point. And being really clear on who does what, and also how the peer can help the counselor, and what the peer is not going to do, so they're not going to steal the person's work. So how sometimes people get into that, like, my counselor, my patient, what are you doing? So I think really putting it out there, and being very clear, this is what I can do to help you, this is what I can't do. And also the peers can also make the counselor's jobs a lot easier if they are doing some of the things that a peer does that the counselor doesn't have time to. Oh, good. I'm glad that I answered the question. But I think again, can you, Clyde, I don't know, can the chat be saved? I'm not sure about that one. Oh, I just realized that yeah, this is WebEx, by the way, not Zoom, but I just realized that I see where I just put in peer recovery support services for SAMHSA. That was the answer to the question before. I just forgot to enter, and that's why you didn't see it. But that's why you can get a lot more information about peer recovery support services. There's also, by the way, I'm looking, this is on my desk, by the way, which you can't see, but there is a self-assessment for peers. So you can Google that as well. And if the peer can you can fill it out yourselves, or you can use it as part of supervision. And then that can be helpful as well. Okay. Other questions? I think it's like anything, it's a process. I've seen a lot of improvements, by the way, and I have to say, working with NADAP, even though we haven't been working, or I haven't been working with them as much since COVID, was just really enjoyable to look at how some things work very well. So I'm hoping for those of you who are on there, I think Stephanie and Lori are on there. Hopefully I'll come back to your place. I'd love to do it in person. I do not know when that will be. Oh, cool. No, I'm glad. So the idea, what I try to do when I am doing webinars is to have you participate as much as possible, because it still happens to me when I listen to somebody and they don't ask me to do anything. I start to fall asleep, or I start to think of other things I can do during the webinar. So I hope this was helpful. And again, it was the first time I'm delivering it, so maybe I'll get feedback from my colleagues of what went well and what to improve on. And I, again, hope it was helpful. So, and more questions, I could stay on for a while because it's still early. Actually, what I am going to do is type in the name of that assessment I was talking about. It's called a peer employee, competent. Let me type first, then I'll tell you what it is. Oops. So there's something called a peer employee competency evaluation form, and that is kind of similar to what I just went over for you for the supervisors, but it is for the peer. I'll read a couple while I'm waiting for questions. Peer staff initiates contact with clients across the continuum of recovery, pre-treatment, blah, blah, blah. All right. Peer staff demonstrates capacity to be non-judgmental and attentively listen and reflect accurate understanding of the client's experiences and feelings. So there are, in fact, I think there's 3 pages on that peer employee competency evaluation form, but I think it could be useful also. Like if I were a supervisor, I might give it out to people and have them do it and use that in individual, actually, and maybe group supervision as well. And then it gives people the opportunity to really look at what they're doing well and also where they can help improve. So it's called the Peer Employee Competency Evaluation Form. And again, there's like no lack of kind of information. Again, I always like to go with some of the work from SAMHSA, not just because the ATTC is sponsored by them, but I like to make sure I get good information that I trust. Okay, so